Good evening, and welcome to the June 5th, 2023 meeting of the Lake Oswego Development Review Commission. Christina, would you please call the roll of commissioners present?
Arthur?
Here.
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 Poinsett?
Here.
Sangre?
Here.
And Lyons?
Here.
And Commissioner Dews and Smith are excused.
Thank you very much. We have a quorum, and I appreciate all the commissioners who are here. Thank you to Commissioners Sangre and Lyons for being available to chair this meeting and other meetings when I'm absent. And I appreciate Kirk Smith's, our vice chair's, work chairing the meeting in my recent absence for a family graduation. Tonight, we're pleased to welcome City Councilor Trudy Corrigan, who will give us a report on City Council activities. Commissioner Corrigan, welcome.
Then we moved to authorize the city manager to sign a public improvement contract with J.W. Fowler in the amount of $4,778,000 for the Blue Heron 2 trunk sanitary sewer project. We moved to authorize the city manager to sign a public improvement contract with Keystone Contracting in the amount of $524,000 for the Daniel Way Channel Stabilization Project. We moved to approve the council's endorsement of projects identified by city staff for inclusion in Metro's 2023 Regional Transportation Plan and for the mayor to sign on behalf of the city council. We received a legislative session update from Madison Thiesing. We had a study session on our new sustainability and climate action plan update from Amanda Watson. Finally, we had a public hearing on the ministerial mitigation requiring stormwater and street improvements for middle housing and smoothing out related items in our code. So we moved to tentatively approve Ordinance 2908 and direct staff to return on June 6, 2023 with a final version of the ordinance, including findings and conclusions for LU 22-031. So thank you very much, and thanks for all that you do.
Commissioners, are there any questions of Councilor Corrigan?
If I could amplify Councilor Corrigan's statement, because the mitigation issue is dear to my heart. It's not just stormwater, and it's not just ministerial. So we are revamping the utility code section to deal with the mitigation requirements that we typically have found in under the conditioning authority for residential development, to provide more clear and objective criteria for what would be required. And it also provides, and this may come before the commission at some point, if a person disagrees with the findings of the city engineer as to what would be required under mitigation, under those standards, they have a right to have a minor development appeal to the city council, or excuse me, to the DRC then to argue about the rough proportionality taking. So we're restructuring that part, both from to provide for ministerial exactions, ministerial mitigations, particularly for triplexes and quadplexes. At this point, kind of catching. We used to have that because those were multifamily dwellings. Under the middle housing, they're no longer multifamily dwellings, but we still need the mitigation requirements for it. So it's opposing to those, kind of catching up with that, but then also providing a better, clear and objective standards. So, okay.
Well, thank you, City Attorney. I appreciate that explanation. And Councilor Corrigan, thank you for your detailed report.
Yes, thank you so much.
We appreciate you being here in person. Our next item of business is review and approval of the May 15th, 2023 minutes of the DRC meeting. A draft set of minutes have been circulated in advance for Commissioners' review. Commissioners, are there any suggested modifications to the draft minutes of the May 15th, 2023 DRC meeting?
I'll move accepting the May 15, 2023 minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excuse me, I'll recuse myself as I was not here at the meeting. So I'm abstaining from voting. But the majority unanimous, who are here unanimously approved the draft minutes as submitted, and they are approved. Commissioner Lyons, did you have a comment? We'll now turn to the draft findings for LU 23-007. This was a request for minor and major alterations to the main house of an historic resource, the Jantzen Estate. This request included a south facade, the front, with a new window, replacement of existing garage doors, windows and vent, as well as restoration of existing windows. And then with respect to the north facade of the Jantzen house, or the lakeside or rear side, the request included a new addition along the east portion, new screen porch with metal roof, a new terrace with an addition below, as well as the removal of railing and skylight, and replacement with a new roof. And also replacement of all existing windows with new windows, door openings, and new dormers. The applicant also proposed removal of 2 trees for the construction of the alterations to the main house. As you may recall, this site is located at 1850 North Shore Road in Lake Oswego, and our staff coordinator was senior planner Evan Franstead. We have received a draft set of findings in our packet and have had an opportunity to review them. Are there any suggested revisions or changes to the draft findings for LU 23-0007? Is there a motion relating to the draft findings?
I'll move the acceptance of the draft findings as permanent.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I will abstain from voting, but Christina, would you please call the roll so we can record the votes on this?
Shearer?
Yes.
Poinsett?
Yes.
Sangri?
Yes.
Lyons?
Yes.
Thank you. Very good. The draft findings are approved as submitted unanimously by those commissioners present and voting. We will now turn to our next agenda item, which is a public hearing. Tonight, we're conducting a public hearing on LU 23-0005. Now, this is a request for modifications of a conditional use permit and development review permit in order to construct a new middle school in Lake Oswego. It includes a request for major variances to bicycle parking and fence screening standards, and also the removal of 52 trees for development activities. This site is the site of the Lake Oswego Junior High, now middle school, at 2500 Country Club Road. Staff coordinator is here with us this evening in person, is senior planner Evan Franstead. Planner Franstead.
Mr. Chair, if I may go ahead with the hearing procedure.
Please.
Thank you. This is a public hearing process. This is a time set for the public hearing as indicated. The public hearing process will be as follows. First, there'll be a presentation by staff, then testimony by the applicant up to 20 minutes. And then looking out at the audience, I don't see anybody other than the applicant's team here. And I understand, does anybody wish to testify other than the applicant in the audience?
We had one. Is Nancy here?
Pardon me?
We had Nancy Osborne, but I'm not sure if she
Okay.
is here.
Well, Well, if Nancy Osborne, who is signed up to testify, does show or comes up on screen, let me know, and I'll do the time requirements for the individuals, but otherwise, let's kind of skip over that. These time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission, testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of or which are part of the presentation by the person shall be counted within that person's time limit. Assume that person is testifying on their own behalf unless they expressly identify the applicant. After testimony in favor, opposed, and neither for nor against in the applicant's rebuttal, up to 5 minutes, so that may occur. Then commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the commission's conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. As stated in the public notice, the deadline for submission of any written materials was noon today. No written materials may be submitted to the commission tonight. Any person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence by requesting a continuation of the public hearing. This land use request is based on the applicable criteria and standards, which are listed in the staff report. It was available online and from the planning department. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria. We ask you to identify to the commission the criteria standards you're addressing, so the commission may consider your testimony in relation to the criteria standards. If you do not identify the criteria standards, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're testifying about and may not consider your testimony in this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes raising the issue to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise any constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action and damages in circuit court. A potential conflict of interest is declared on behalf of each of the DRC members to the extent of their business or employment, which each will identify. Unless declared otherwise, the respective DRC member does not have a known present or anticipated future business relationship with the project or the applicant. It's possible that a future business relationship could arise the initiation, design, construction, or maintenance of the project through either the employment or business of the DRC member personally or through a relative as defined in ORS 244.020. At this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have any bias on the application, any financial conflicts of interest to declare, and please state your business or employment. Commissioner Poinsett.
My name is Bruce R. Poinsett. I'm a construction safety consultant, partner in a firm called GEW LLC. We're based in Washington. I've had no contact, no planned contact, no ex parte contact, nothing.
Thank you. Commissioner Scherer?
My name is Jeff Shearer. I'm a retired contractor. I'm very familiar with the site as I went to school there. I've had no ex parte contacts, no bias, and no financial conflict of interest.
Thank you, Commissioner Scherer, or Commissioner Sangri.
My name is Dwight Sangre. I'm a retired civil engineer. I'm quite familiar with the site. I have no relationship with the list of contractors and service personnel. I have had no ex parte contact with anyone. Do not anticipate that I have any bias whatsoever in this project.
Thank you. I'm Randy Arthur. I'm a civil litigation attorney in the Portland office of Bullivant Hauser Bailey, of a law firm. And I was given a list of potential persons involved in this application and ran a conflicts check. So I just wanted to be sure everyone knew. Our Seattle office of Bullivant Hauser did represent the Lake Oswego School District in a matter that's now closed. Also, KPFF was found to be a party adverse or possibly opposing clients of ours in certain matters that are open. DKS was found to be a possible opposing party or an adverse party to our clients in an open matter. I'm of counsel with the firm. I haven't worked on any of these matters, know nothing about them, and it doesn't influence my vote or analysis tonight, nor do I derive any financial benefit directly from the outcome or working on these firm matters. I have not had any ex parte contacts. I've not made a site visit. I have no financial interest, and no disqualifying conflict. Thank you. Commissioner Lyons?
My name is Tim Lyons. I am an attorney with Best and Krieger. I've had no ex parte contacts other than visiting the site regularly. My daughter's a 7th grader at Lake Ridge Middle School, but plays softball at Lake Oswego Junior High occasionally. I have no bias and no financial conflict of interest.
Thank you.
Is there any challenge to Commissioners' right to consider the application? Hearing none, Senior Planner Evan Franstead with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Boone and members of the Commission. The application before you tonight is a modification of a conditional use permit and development review permit to construct a new middle school that will increase the maximum student enrollment from 1,050 to 1,100 students. Also requesting major variances to the bicycle parking standards and to the fence screening standards, and removal of 46 trees for development activities. The Lake Oswego Middle School is located on a unified site with Uplands Elementary that is approximately 30.41 acres in size, comprised of 2 tax lots. The school campus has frontage on Country Club Road, and additional vehicle access point is located on Wembley Park Road. The site is zoned public functions, PF for short. To the north, across Country Club Road is zoned PF and includes Lake Oswego High School. To the south, the budding properties include Springbrook Park, Zone P&A, and residential dwellings that are zoned R10. To the east, budding properties are zoned R10 and developed with a River West Church and residential dwellings. To the west, Springbrook Park, Zone P&A, and residential dwellings zoned R10. Here's an aerial photo of the site. As you can see, the perimeter of the site is lined with trees. The site slopes up from Country Club Road to a plateau near the center of the site where the existing middle school is located. The existing middle school building, parking lot, and western multi-use sports facility will be removed and rebuilt as part of this project. No changes are proposed to Uplands Elementary School and the existing eastern softball field. A resource conservation district, RP district, with tree grove, and resource protection district, RP district, with wetlands, bisects the campus site between the 2 school sites. No development is proposed in sensitive lands districts. Here's the site plan. The proposed improvements to the site include a new building, parking lot, internal pathways, and athletic fields to the west. The proposed building is located approximately 103.5 feet from the front lot line along Country Club Road. The required average setbacks from the east and west lot lines is 27 feet. The closest portion of the proposed structure is approximately 385 feet from the east property line and 39.8 feet from the west property line. Here's the first floor plan. I'm showing you those to understand the design of the building, because the site plan looks like it's 2 separate buildings, but it's actually one. The first floor includes courtyards and a screening fence to separate the 2 wings, and then the second floor combines the 2 wings. There's a whole nother floor up there. It's kind of hard to just understand the design. Here's the roof plan. It shows there's mechanical equipment on the roof that will be screened. It also shows the skylights there, then the preferred alternative. Here's perspective drawings. So that's something on top is a view from Country Club Road. You can see it's up there in the plateau. It's kind of hard to see from the road itself. Same as this today. Then the one below is view from the west. And then you have the courtyard views. So as you're walking up to the school with the front on the top right. And then you have South Commons and outdoor learning area to the south of the building. Okay, and here's the proposed designs. So they're proposing 2 different designs. You have a preferred design on on the left, and alternative design on the right. The preferred design includes brick, natural ground face CMU, and more wood materials. The alternative design includes a darker fiber cement and metal panels that are less expensive. Exterior cladding alternative to brick and wood materials proposed for option. The applicant is asking for both to be reviewed, so the final selection can be made during the final design and costing phase at the building permit time. So we'll be talking about both designs as we go along here. The maximum height for this building, based on the location, is 49.2 feet. The preferred design option height varies in height from 34.7 feet to 38.5 feet, meeting the standard. The alternative design does not exceed a height of 35 feet, meeting the standard. The building design standards require, where existing buildings are to remain on site, new development shall be designed to integrate the remaining buildings into the overall design or provide separate landscaping, remodeling, or other treatment which establishes a distinct character and function of the remaining buildings. Integration with the remaining buildings into the overall design means that new development presents a cohesive site in regards to height and overall massing. The Uplands Elementary School building, hitting barn, modular buildings will remain on the unified site. Uplands Elementary is located approximately 600 feet from the proposed new building. The two schools are visually separated by a continuous row of trees that are located in the RC district. The only connectivity between the two sites, between two schools, is a pedestrian pathway. Staff finds existing landscaping within the RC district and distance provides a sufficient character and function between the two schools, meeting the standard. As for accessory structures associated with the middle school that will remain, those are utilitarian in design and use with simple forms. Staff finds the new middle school building establishes a distinct character and function from the accessory structures on site that will remain. Overall, staff finds that the applicant's narrative, along with the proposed elevations and landscaping plan, adequately address how both building designs comply with the applicable building design criteria. So both building designs we're recommending approval. Here's the landscaping plan. The site contains 41% in open space and landscaping set-asides. The landscaping plan shows numerous existing trees to meet the street tree requirement. The parking lot includes a mix of trees and shrubs. The existing landscaping along the perimeter of the site and proposed landscaping provides screening between the new building, parking lot, sports fields, and surrounding uses. The landscaping mitigates the noise, lighting, and other impacts to the surrounding uses. For tree removal, the applicant is proposing to remove 46 trees for removal for proposed construction activities, which include the school athletic field pathways, parking lot will be constructed, as well as for grading and installation of utilities. The applicant's arborist report states that removal will not have a significant negative impact on erosion, soil stability, flow of surface waters because the erosion control plan will be used during construction, and there are no slide areas or unstable soils or surface water. The proposed tree removal will not have any impacts on adjacent trees or existing windbreaks because the trees that will be removed do not provide any windbreaks for trees that be retained. Of the 46 trees proposed for removal, 15 trees we need to evaluate as significant trees because they're non-invasive, over 15 inches in diameter, and in fair or better health. Of those trees, there's 2 large Douglas fir trees that were determined to be significant due to the prominent location near the driveway on Country Club Road. And it's kind of challenging to see this, but I think I can point it out. They are those 2 trees right there in the corner. So those are 2 large Douglas fir trees that there's photos in the staff report that show what they look like, but as you pull in the driveway, they're pretty prominent, and staff is saying those are significant. Also, they're proposing to remove 2 trees nearby those other 2 trees, which, when looked at from the street view, removal of all 4 trees together creates a gap in the neighborhood skyline. And in addition, they're also removing two street trees along Country Club Road. So the trees that are significant, the trees that removal will alter the skyline, and the removal of the street trees are evaluated for compliance with criterion 3 that requires alternatives to tree removal have been considered, and no reasonable alternative exists to allow the property to be used as permitted in the zone. The applicant's arborist report states that in the process of planning, several alternatives were considered, and those alternatives were deemed inaccessible to achieve the purpose of the project within the site without impacting more trees and adjacent properties. The 4 trees that would alter the neighborhood skyline are proposed for removal for construction of a path, the rebuilding the path from Country Club Road, in order to provide better pedestrian accessibility with more gradual slope to the new school. The existing grading plan shows extensive grading in this area to lessen the slope. Staff finds a no feasible alternative to removal of the 4 trees when considering the proximity of the trees in the existing pathway, topography, and the site from Country Club Road, and the necessary grading to reduce the slope of the pathway. So no feasible alternative exists for those 4 trees. The 2 street trees are proposed for removal for installation of a storm line. The site along Country Club Road includes a dense stand of trees. Any connection to the storm line would require removal of trees. The stormwater plan and stormwater report detail the location of the storm line, which is necessary to direct stormwater from the new building to the existing storm line along Country Club Road. The plans demonstrate there is no feasible alternative to provide the required stormwater line connection without removing those trees. Staff concludes that a removal of the 46 trees complies with applicable criteria. 48 mitigation trees are required, 29 of which shall be native species. The landscaping plan shows 187 trees, including 100 native species trees will be planted. Moving on to the conditional use criteria. For criterion 1, the dimensional standards include setbacks, maximum height, and lot coverage in the PF zone. Those are all met. So criterion 1 is met. Criterion 2, there's 2 applicable standards, site-specific standards for major public facilities and one for educational institutions. The standards specific for major public facilities, utilities, and streets and other necessary improvements will be provided. The proposed building does not exceed a maximum height of 50 feet. The proposal includes mechanical equipment located on the roof and generator service area. The noise generating equipment will be screened and located approximately 128 feet from the closest residential property to the west. Staff finds a significant distance and screening will provide significant buffer from the nearest residential uses. The lighting plan shows that lights from the building, parking lot, athletic field, and pathways will not create glare or spill over onto adjacent residential properties. Staff finds the operation of the school will have the same or comparable impacts to adjacent uses as the existing school and do not need to be adjusted to avoid conflicts. For the site-specific standards for educational institution uses, this requires school to provide on-site circulation with walkways, safe loading and ingress and egress on and to the site. The applicant's narrative states that unified site will retain the basic functions of the existing on-site circulation with driveway and walkway to the front parking lot and main building entrance. The proposal includes widening in the existing driveway to Country Club Road to enhance the access for vehicles and bicycles. The unified site plan shows a new parking lot includes separate loops for student drop-off and pickup and for school buses. Separating parent and drop-off and loading areas is expected to improve safety. The existing internal walkways that connect to Uplands Elementary will remain. The site plan also demonstrates on-site circulation, including improvements to the pathway to Country Club Road, improve on-site circulation. The standards are met. For criterion 3, this requires the site is physically capable of accommodating the proposed use. As I said before, the site is approximately 30.41 acres in size. Reconstruction will increase the number of students by 50. The applicant's narrative states the increase will not have significantly larger noise or similar off-site impacts than the existing school capacity, which has proven to be compatible with the surrounding residential neighborhood. A transportation analysis was submitted that evaluated the proposed impacts resulting from the enrollment increase. The queuing within the site is not anticipated to affect operations to the public intersection onto Country Club Road. The project meets the required number of parking spaces. The required amount of open space and landscaping will be provided. Staff finds the site is capable of accommodating an additional 50 students as proposed. This criterion is met. Criterion 4 requires the functional characteristics of the proposed use are such that they can be made reasonably compatible with uses in the vicinity. The applicant states the middle school has operated on this site for many years, and the new school will be of comparable size with an enrollment capacity increase of only 50 students. The transportation analysis anticipates the new school to generate 39 additional trips during the AM peak hour and 28 additional trips during the PM peak hour. The additional trips in the PM peak hour in the intersection of the driveway and Country Club was found to be operating and projecting to the continuing operating of the city's performance standards level of service E. The analysis recommends providing a second northbound approach and restripe their approach to provide a dedicated left turn lane and shared right turn lane as shown on site plan. The analysis found that there's no queuing issues on the roadway that will be associated with the proposal. In addition, the study provided a review of crash history at each site of the study area intersections. No transfer patterns were identified that indicated a safety concern, and no safety-based mitigations were identified. The driveway onto Country Club Road meets the site distance standards. For parking, as I said, the proposal complies with the parking access standards. There's no increased impacts from the parking lot because there's adequate queuing of the in the parking lot for cars that will be dropping off and picking up students. and the parking lot is of adequate capacity. The use of the parking lot will not have impacts to surrounding properties because the parking lot is over 300 feet from the nearest residential use. As for operating in noise, the school operates Monday through Wednesdays and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 3:55 p.m. On Thursdays, site operates from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The hours of operation alone are not expected to have significant impacts on surrounding uses. Proposed increase in student capacity is not expected to create more noise that can be heard off-site than the current use, because the student congregation area is similar distance, about 50 feet from residential uses to the west. Staff finds, as illustrated in the existing levels of operation, in the small increase of student capacity, sufficient distance from adjacent uses, and timing of traffic generated by the proposed increase in students, adequate off-site capacity to prevent backup in the right-of-way queuing from the site, and operations will be reasonably compatible with the uses in the vicinity. In conclusion, staff finds the proposal meets the conditional use criteria. Now on to the major variances. As I said before, they're requesting 2 major variances. The first one is to allow outdoor bicycle parking spaces to be not located within 50 feet of the building entrance. It is my understanding that the applicants have revised their plans to comply with this standard, so I'm not going to go into our analysis of denial. I will go into the second variance, which they're requesting to allow an 8-foot tall fence without requiring an evergreen hedge per the fence screening standards. So here's the site plan with the landscaping. The mesh fence I'll be referring to is along the west side of the courtyard here, this is the fire access lane, and then here's abutting properties to the west. So right there. And it's also shown figuratively here. That's the fence right there you can see through. Okay, so as I said, staff has recommended denial for both these variances. The structural drawing shows the fence from the west. The first criterion is whether the requested variance prevents an unnecessary hardship, so that's important, unnecessary hardship. In determining whether an unnecessary hardship exists, alternative site plans are considered to determine if the asserted hardship can be avoided by another design. If so, then the asserted hardship is not necessary because it can't be avoided. It is not an unnecessary hardship to comply with the code requirements absent a site-specific physical circumstance. A major variance cannot be used to effectively repeal a code requirement because the developer has other design preferences. So these are basic interpretations that staff has used in the past for major variances. For this site, as I talked about, the site slopes up from Country Club Road by approximately 24 feet into a plateau where the existing middle school is located, which limits the development area of the site to the new school access lane and parking lot. The existing sports field that will be retained in the sensitive land districts to the south further limit the development area. The proposed school is located in the existing building footprint, which by retaining the existing site features, including the existing trees, and minimize the site impacts. So this is to say that the proposed development is limited to a specific area on site, but that's really about the only physical circumstance of the property they have to deal with. Otherwise, it's just a plateau, and they can work within that area to meet the standard. The applicants propose to have a mesh fence greater than 6 feet in height, located along the west boundary that I showed you of the Savannah courtyard. The fire access lane and the road trees are located between the fence and the west lot line. The applicant seeks a major variance to the requirement to plant an evergreen hedge because the need for enhanced school campus security is necessary, and security fencing must allow visibility through it to maximize security benefit. So for security, and the second part is the applicant asserts the hedge is not necessary because the fence would be screened anyway by the existing trees and distance of the fence to the property line. It should be noted the requirement of a screened hedge would not preclude any small width gaps in the hedge for the gates to open and people can come and go. There doesn't have to be a solid screen all the way through. The hedge can have parts to it. Staff finds the applicant has not demonstrated that there's a physical circumstance that prevents compliance with the applicable code requirement. Rather, the applicant argues that in this instance, the requirement for screening is unnecessary because no one will benefit from the screening due to the existing trees and distance of the fence to the property line. While staff agrees that screening may be unnecessary, the planting of the evergreen hedge is not a hardship. Staff finds the applicant has not demonstrated a physical circumstance or other special circumstance or condition beyond the applicant's control that results in planting of the evergreen hedge, being an undue or a unique hardship, or result in taking of a private property without compensation under state or federal law. Staff finds that this consideration for the variance request is not met. On to the next consideration, whether hardship was created by the person requesting the variance. To the extent there is any hardship created by the planting of a hedge, staff finds that the hardship resulting from the applicant's design that the fence to be greater than 6 feet tall. If it was 6 feet or less, they would not be required to install a hedge. Because it's over 6 feet, they want the 8-foot tall fence, the code clearly says they need a hedge. So there's no physical circumstance of the property that has shown that to necessitate a fence greater than 6 feet tall. In fact, their narrative or their application doesn't talk about why it can't be 6 feet tall. This consideration for the variance request is not met. The next consideration is the economic impact of the applicant on the applicant if that variance is denied. The applicant's narrative states that there could be potentially a modest economic impact to meet the standard. If the variance is denied, the plans would need to be revised to lower the height to 6 feet or less, or provide the hedge between the fence and the fire access lane to the west. Staff finds that this consideration is not met. Other factors deemed relevant by the reviewing authority. The narrative states that given the location and character of their surroundings, the intent of the evergreen screen would be satisfied without placing its vegetation along the fence, because unlike many fences along or near the property line, the proposed fence will be approximately 35 feet to the west of the property line. Physical screening is currently provided along the west property line by existing trees and other vegetation and fences. Staff does not find any of those relevant factors under unnecessary hardship. And the last part of the major variance criteria, because the proposed mesh fence is located 35 from the closest abutting property line to the west, and there is a row of trees along the west lot line to be retained, which provide a visual screen, there will be no impacts with the requested variance to the fence screening standards, so criterion 2 is met. Staff finds there's no unnecessary hardship, and the applicant has not shown that it's not feasible to comply with the code, so criterion 3 is not met. In conclusion, staff is recommending approval of 23-0005 for the modification of a conditional use permit, development review permit, and removal of 46 trees with conditions, subject to the recommended conditions, and denial of the major variances. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Planner Franstead, for that detailed and comprehensive report. Commissioners, before we invite the applicant to come up and address us, are there any questions you have of the professional staff on the application?
Yes.
Commissioner Lyons?
I would like to see the previous slide, and then also after that, where on the site plan or whatever map you have this hedge is. In looking at that image, I'm specifically trying to see, is this the fence between Springbrook Park and the athletic fields?
There's an existing fence along the property line. So there's, yeah, this is a property line with the budding houses. Then you have a row of trees and vegetation. Then you have the fire access lane, which is 20 feet wide. And there's the fence right there.
At some point right around where your cursor is, it's switched. There's a house, I think actually a little bit further, I don't know the directions, north or up from where your cursor was, and then it switches to Springbrook Park, as far as I know. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can go back to the location map.
Right, so that, okay, so it's about half. So the blue line from top, I mean, I'm not describing it very well, but the blue line that's on the left, the boundary of the two parcels or unified parcel, unified site, is the mesh screen, that entire blue line?
No, that's the lot lines.
Okay, so it's
So-
just from, sorry.
Yeah, where Springbrook Park is, that's about where the ball field is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you think about, go back to the site plan.
Could you go back one
Yeah,
slide,
yeah.
that photograph?
So the mesh fence would be from where that 14190 assessed lot is, down at the
No, I don't
bottom
think-
right corner?
No, I don't think it goes down that far. Here, let me go back to the, it's hard to see on that plan. Let me go back to where we were. So it's just between the two wings.
Ooh.
So it goes, that's one end, that's the south end. So the ball field's down here. So it just connects from there to there.
Okay, so those are houses right to the left then?
Yes.
Not park, okay.
Right,
That's what I was getting at.
yeah.
Commissioner Lyons, other
Which
questions?
side of the fence would the hedge be on?
It would need to be on the west side, between the fire access lane and the fence.
Okay. That's all then, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners at this point? I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that in the report, there was an issue about bicycle parking location, and a lot of the report addresses that. You indicated, I think, that the applicant has revised the plans to address that. How have those plans been revised?
Will it be part of their presentation? I don't want to steal their thunder.
Okay.
But
All right.
it would be located within 50 feet of the covering, which we determined was part of the entrance. But yeah, as you'll see, if I can, it'll be over here on this side and down here along there. So part of it will be covered, but yeah, they'll show you.
On the fence screening variance, if I understood correctly, you mentioned that campus security was an issue in not planting the hedge. Is that not a relevant factor to take into consideration on evaluating the request for a major variance?
When you look at the criteria, we're looking for the physical circumstances of the property, looking at the purpose language, you look to the owing to special circumstances or conditions beyond the applicant's control, and then, or undue and unique hardship. And I believe the applicant is going to, well, the applicant makes the position that security is necessary for their use. Well, when you look to whether or not the hardship is created by the person requesting the variance, what that really means is whether or not the person's use is creating the need for the variance. Okay? It's not the person individually, but what they propose to do with the property. So while the applicant certainly may have a justifiable reason why they think that security issues are present, that's really because of their use. And that is not a major hardship issue, we feel, because it doesn't relate to the physical circumstances of the property or any unique or unusual undue or unique hardship because of the property. I mean, you're trying to look, we're not trying, if I can take the staff's position, we're not trying to legislate what the code should be now for this particular applicant. We have numerous provisions in our code which look to an applicant's specific use and then say, well, that applicant gets this, gets that, they have to do X, Y, Z type of thing. I mean, with the special use standards, address that. That's what I think, that's what staff believes that the applicant is reporting here, is advancing here, is to say, well, because of our use, we have a special need to do this. But I don't think, we have not applied the major variance standard to be an applicant-specific use type thing. And I can just come, there is other types of uses that may similarly advance a security issue. I think, as we all know, that the schools have been a site of some unfortunate, events, shootings, et cetera. So have movie theaters and grocery stores and churches, and so that I think is that is an issue I think could be best addressed by a code amendment, not a major variance, because there's nothing unique about this property that leans to that. That's sort of the summary of staff's position on the major variance, because we didn't see anything advanced that shows anything unique about the property. Now, there is the issue about, well, why do you need to have screening if nobody can see it? Okay, well, I want to emphasize that the screening requirement applies to both residential and non-residential uses. And as indicated in the staff report, we don't make a fact-based analysis on the screening, because that would take, we'd have to introduce evidence about it. It would not be a clear and objective standard. Since that standard is also applied for residential, and residential has to, under state law, be applied clearly and objectively, we don't feel that we have the discretion to say, well, in this instance, looking from these houses, we can't see it, everything. So that's why the staff has been applying a uniform interpretation of that, because we have to apply that uniformly to to residential properties as required by state law.
Well, thank you for that explanation. That's very helpful. So Planner Franstead, then the professional staff's recommendation is the request for the variance on the fence screening be denied, and that as a condition of approval of the application, there be a requirement that the evergreen hedge screen be planted. Is that correct?
Well, they have two options. So they can drop the fence height down to 6 or less, or they can, plant the hedge.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments of staff at this point? If I may, at this point, I'd like to invite the applicant to come up. Thank you, City Attorney.
Questions?
So the applicant owner is the Lake Oswego School District, and primary representative is Mr. Keith Lydon, and I'd like to invite Mr. Lydon and the school district and their representatives to come forward, please. Good evening.
Lydon is not here tonight.
Welcome.
Mic's not working.
How's that? Very good. Thank you. Chair Arthur, commissioners, thank you for having us tonight, and thank you for reviewing our application. This is an exciting project, another brand new school. I know some of you went to the old school, so we are certainly going to be honoring that as we redevelop here. I did prepare a slide presentation to give you a little idea of what we have kind of beyond what you really review as code. This is kind of our common practice for our new buildings, and I think it's important for you as commissioners, City of Lake Oswego, and our audience to understand a little bit more about our project. You can see the existing site. This gives you a good idea of where the existing facility will land, or the new will land over the existing. As we get further into the conversation, we'll be talking about some of the variances, and this may be helpful. During any of our newer projects, even our renovations, smaller projects, we do a pretty significant amount of outreach. Here you can see some of the outreach we've done with our students, community members, staff, certainly our parents. We have open houses. This is just a couple of things that we've done. Some of the things that our design reflects look at ideas about learning, the connections within the building, how we get in and out of the building, circulate throughout the spaces as well as the site. Our design process was pretty extensive, and we arrived at some themes. You can see we have different ecologies that are kind of pointed out. Educational wing kind of being the forested area. You see a color palette reflective inside of the building with a lot of greens, kind of muted colors, a warm feeling as you go in those spaces. We may even have lighting that will be reflective of the space. Meadow area, we have some of our louder things, gyms, music, commons area, a lot more blue tones. We wanted to give an idea of what this actually might look like with some more detailed renderings than what you saw prior. The top, you can see the main entrance, parent drop-off. The bottom, the secure courtyard that will house our students during lunch periods, gathering spaces for small groups, passing between class periods as well. Students will arrive and they'll mostly congregate in the commons area. You can see we have a large learning stair that will look out to our performance platform. Up above is where we have areas where students can look from cafe tables out to the beautiful views that you see behind you. I think ours will actually maybe be a little bit better. We'll see. Also, our library is upstairs, and then there's the connection to the second floor of our learning wing. It's a view from up above. You can see kind of the space in the library, large windows. And one of the stairs that go up to the learning areas. Another view of what you might see in the classroom wing. A lot of transparency throughout, places to put student art, areas to break out into smaller groups and congregate. And get into the site, one of the big themes that we talked about arriving to the campus, one of the constraints we've had since this property has been in use is the lack of accessible pathways. We do have some services that extend across the street to our high school. That connection is important to us. Having accessibility to our site from the right-of-way is important. This allows that with a new accessible path you can see meander through. Additionally, we have kind of directed community paths. We don't want to close down the site during school necessarily. We want to direct pedestrians that may be coming through the site to the outskirts of the property and be very thoughtful in how people circulate throughout the day. Want to get into some of the variances. We talked about the fence screening, and I don't really ever do this, but I need to challenge this one because of the notion of security specifically. This is related to the screening. We have an 8-foot fence, and at some of our other schools, we have 8-foot fences that are specific for security purposes. Lake Ridge Middle School is our sister school. We use very specific school, one of which is outdoor learning spaces, a secure courtyard. Lake Ridge Middle School has buildings that connect much closer than this building. One of the things that we've heard since occupancy is the lack of daylighting in some of the inner corner classrooms, which partially led to what you see here, an opened up courtyard to the west that has an 8-foot security fence. It does have free egress for our occupants. This courtyard will be used throughout the day for students passing between classes. Will also be used heavily during lunch periods. We have limited number of staff members that will be observing and overseeing the students that, could be in the 300s potentially during a lunch period out in that courtyard. There's a very strong possibility that students will sometimes pass through the gate when they shouldn't be. We want to make sure that we have eyes on our students. We do have students that will stray. We need to be able to see them. Initially, when we started talking about the requirement for screening, we requested that the screening not be required due to the extensive vegetation you see in the pictures on the left. Adjacent to those areas, you can see delineated with the arrows. We had conversations with staff. We understand the position. We do think that this is a unique circumstance for a school with young children at some capacity in that courtyard with limited amount of oversight. We want to make sure that we're keeping our students safe. Additionally, we do have a fire access lane that goes around the building. We've done that to ensure quick access to our facility in case of an emergency. I certainly don't want to bring our first responders into the conversation, but we did do a study in 2018, a district-wide study for safety and security with a national firm called True North. They concluded that concealment areas are a big problem for schools, that vegetation and screening of this kind is something that we should consider removing in some cases, and that we should consider clear lines of sight. So what that means is that pathway or the access drive, we would want to keep that open. What we are going to propose now is that we keep the screening, but we move it to the west side of the fire access lane. By doing so, we still create a screen in addition to the screening that already exists as a buffer between our neighbors and our property. We are always strategic when we place plantings. Sometimes we work with our neighbors on a day of planting, and we shift a plant 1 foot one way or 1 foot the other way based on what they would prefer. Usually have our city staff out there with us while we're doing something like that. But this is what we're proposing now. So we would like to keep the fence at 8 feet, maintain screening that we would have approved by staff, but place it on the west side of the access lane. We had another screen that we were going to lower to 6 feet to meet the requirement. Won't stay talking about this too long. And then the bicycle parking, we added bicycle parking. The reason we had it kind of separated in the past, based on the uses of the site, we wanted to make sure that we were covering our fields to the south as well as our play areas where we know we're going to have kids congregating. So we've added additional bike parking. That's my presentation. Again, I thank you for your considerations in hearing this, and open it up to any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much. Commissioners, Commissioner Sangri?
Would you go back, please, to the schematic you showed where you're recommending a change from what we had previously reviewed? Where is the just the schematic of your, this one, yes, thank you. Which is the 6-foot fence? You're retaining the 8-foot fence next to the student meadow area, but
yes, so
the
you
other
see,
fence is a property line fence. Is that right? The existing fence?
right, so there is an existing fence on the property line. Evan, can you point to that?
So it's really a 6-foot screen that of vegetation that you're putting on the west side of the fire lane. No fence. That's just a.
Correct.
You're essentially moving the required vegetation from the adjacency to the 8-foot fence to a point 25 feet further to the west.
That is correct.
That's essentially this proposal.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would just say I don't really understand what you're proposing. And I'm just wondering if there are any visuals that would be more helpful. Honestly, with the screen, I'm not entirely certain what the initial proposal is either. Are there any visuals that would show, like, because I think that if somebody could see, you know, the perspective of if you were on this side of the fence or screen, what would you be looking at? Is that the interior of the courtyard? And then is that courtyard, I'm kind of straying from my original comment, forgive me, but the courtyard that you want to secure, would that courtyard with this mesh fence be completely, and the building itself, be able to be completely secured? And if with the lack of a fence there, the screen the mesh fence prevent that?
It would prevent it from being totally secured.
So with the mesh screen that you have as part of your initial proposal, that courtyard and the building during a security event could be completely closed down?
Yes, so during school hours, the courtyard is secure. So you cannot come in unless you have a badge or you have keys. You can freely leave.
Right.
Which is one of the concerns, that if we have dense screening along the fence, and this is an ornamental picket-type fence that we're proposing now that is similar to what you would see at our Lake Ridge High School, as an example. This type of fence, you'll be able to see out, you'll be able to see in, but by moving the screen, we not only remove potential climbable screening that could get somebody over a fence relatively easy. A 6-foot fence is relatively easy to scale. What we want to be sure that we're doing is we're creating multiple barriers along the way before you get into a building or you get to our occupants, in the case of, an intruder, for an example.
All right, well, as a kid who used to stray, I can understand why you would want to see the middle schoolers out there who have strayed. But with your modified proposal, would it still be an enclosed courtyard? I guess that's the part I'm not understanding.
Yes.
So, and it would be enclosed because of the existing chain link fence separate?
This
No.
is a new fence.
New
So if you look
fence.
at the
Okay, that's a new
left,
fence with new vegetation.
correct.
Just moved west.
And we maintain the existing fence that is on the property line already. So that-
Existing fence remains,
Yep.
mesh fence moving towards existing.
Mesh fence remaining where it is. You can see the drawing here. Really what we're talking about is the red line is the screening that now becomes in the location of the blue line.
You're leaving your mesh fence where it is, secured courtyard, but you're going to put some screening over by the existing chain link fence.
Yes. In that proximity, yes.
Do we know whether or not that's acceptable to staff?
I was going to ask, but is this a time to ask staff or is,
Sure.
okay.
So the way we've always applied the standard is that the screen needs to be adjacent to the fence, close proximity. Depends on the type of hedge you want to install and the width of hedge. But yeah, it's always been, within 5-10 feet of it to provide that necessary screen. The idea probably when this code was adopted was they were thinking of fences along property lines, and anything above 6 feet tall, they wanted to provide some relief and have a hedge along it as well. So this is a little different situation, but yeah, we've always applied it that the hedge needs to be next to the fence.
And what is the width of the fire lane here? Is that 20 feet?
12
It's 20 feet.
12 feet?
It's shown 20 feet on site plan, so this is different. I don't know, is it changing to 12? It's changing to 12. Okay.
Does that alter staff's analysis of the proposed variation for the evergreen hedge screen?
No, it's still our basic, the way we applied it all these years. The hedge needs to be next to the fence.
And as a commission, if the hardship factors are not satisfied, are we constrained in approving this application without the hedge?
Well, let me just jump in one minute. Maybe you have two questions. The first question is whether or not a hedge 12 feet from the fence is screened, whether that screens the fence. I mean, the code requires a hedge to screen the fence. If the commission concludes that 12 feet away screens the fence, then there's no variance. Okay? That's not staff's historical interpretation, but that's what's being proposed here by the applicant.
And that's something the commission has within its power to
Well,
find.
you have to interpret the language, yes. If the commission concludes that 12 feet away, a hedge 12 feet away from the fence is not screening, okay, then we are at the variance question, okay? But if you interpret that the distance away is compliant with the standard, you don't need the variance.
Can we see the standard, please?
That's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah, well, you
It's
want
on the slide.
A fence over 6 feet in height must be screened by an evergreen hedge, which shall be a size and spacing so as to provide a 6-foot-high dense screen within 3 years, of the date of planting. So all you've really got to work with is must be screened by an evergreen hedge. Okay,
Are you proposing an evergreen hedge in the modified proposal?
Yes. We have western red cedar, I believe, that is proposed along that edge.
Have we ever considered western red cedar a 6-foot evergreen hedge? Do we know?
Yeah, that's fine. If it's maintained as a hedge, planted closely and then topped regularly, then it is considered a hedge, and you see that everywhere. And I'd like to point out really quickly that it's not just separated by 12 feet under this new narrow fire access lane. It is the actual access lane as well. So it's not just a physical distance. There is a use separation there as well.
You have on your, I believe you have on your presentation the code. You flip to it?
We did review the code in detail, and, you know, as I mentioned before, we do see some differences here, specifically students being the occupants. And now we could have potentially designed the building in a completely different configuration, yet we would have been going against some of our design standards that have evolved since our last school based on ongoing input that we've received. This scenario, I think we've done the best we can with the design given the spaces that we have available to us. The screening we interpret as what are you screening from? And typically, and I believe staff believes the same, but they can chime in if they think different, is that you're trying to screen from your neighbors or off-site. In this case, we have a dense vegetation screen already. We're proposing now to include more. The fence is certainly not a hideous thing to look at. It is ornamental in nature.
Commissioner Sangre.
The other option that staff introduced was the option of reducing the fence to 6 feet. And I heard you say that you're dealing with someone's criterion that an 8-foot fence is necessary for security. Could you describe very briefly whose criterion is that, and is that broadly accepted by the city as something necessary to secure a school environment?
Typically, our school perimeter fences are 6 feet in height. We call them good neighbor fences. They could be of any type of design, but our typical chain link fence around a site is 6 feet. When we get closer to a building, we're trying to create what is a secure barrier. We go to 8 feet or more. The case of Lakers Middle School, we're much higher than 8 feet, but the security fencing is really an extension of the building in that case, which is my understanding why we were able to kind of do what we did there.
Yeah, but I come back to the question, who is the expert on security or the professional organization that is saying in 2023 or 2025, security requires an 8-foot fence? Who's saying that?
Our security consultants, True North, also talk about 8-foot fences. 6 foot is very easy to climb, especially when you're a middle schooler.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Commissioner Scherer.
The existing fence, is that yours or is that the property owner's?
There's a combination of, we will be infilling a couple of fences. We have discussions with property owners. If they have a fence that is beginning to deteriorate, we will offer to replace it in kind. Some of those conversations are yet to happen.
And I guess if I read the code right, it says to screen the fence over 6 feet. It doesn't say it has to be within 3 feet.
No, there's no set distance from the hedge to the fence. It doesn't say how close or how far. So if you're thinking about 12, 20 feet, what about more? It doesn't give us any leeway there.
Well, I mean, he's got a 12-foot lane with a 5-foot 5'2" setback, so it's actually 17 feet that he would be where his hedge would be. So, you know, I guess my thought process is
Are you deliberating, Commissioner? But go ahead.
No, I'm going to look at Evan. I mean,
Yes.
I just want to ask you a question. I think I agree with you, but in the back of my mind, I'm kind of like, yeah, but does that make sense in this instance? But I don't know that we have the ability to do anything about that. Maybe that's my question.
Well, and again, I want, there's two ways, there's two questions. One is, does the placement of 12 or so feet away, does that screen? You know, and staff indicated, yes, there's a question of what are you screening to, but then my concern is, well, the further away you are, the more risk you have of making a factual analysis of whether or not it's being screened, and that's not clear and objective, and I get into that problem, all right? If you say that's too far away to be screening, then we're into the major variance question, and what you've heard is, well, design and usage, okay? Which is not, which staff has not applied for a major variance, because we're looking, a major variance is where this property is unique, okay, and creates this unnecessary hardship. Not that this use is unique, okay, because we permit the use, so theoretically all the standards accommodate the use. So when you have a variance, you're trying to deal with the uniqueness of that the site has given, not the concerns that a particular applicant has.
So my question to you is, if we say, we agree with staff.
On the variance question?
On the variance.
Okay.
Is there a forum for them to apply to get a more secure than screening through the city?
As we've indicated in the staff report, I think the staff is sympathetic with the concerns of the applicant.
Yes.
We think that there's probably a code amendment necessary. We've suggested two possibilities. One, if this was a minor variance, then you're just looking to, as you know, in a minor variance, you're just looking to essentially the streetscape impacts.
Right.
Okay. So that would seem tailor-made for this. Alternatively, if the council wanted to say you don't need to have screening when you're either so many feet away from the property line, or if you're a particular use, in this case, school, church, grocery store.
So if we said,
what is the next
we
issue?
agreed with staff, they'd still have 2 years to do something.
Yes, they would take, they would have the obligation to comply and then seek legislative amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
And then that would come back for a mod. Okay. We'll take judicial notice of that. Okay.
Yeah, if I could ask a question of the
Yes, go ahead.
applicant to confirm my understanding of what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're essentially saying that the requirement is that the mesh fence be screened, and if we're screening it, it would have to be screened from the perspective of a viewer, and from the perspective of the potential viewer being those homeowners, it is screened by a 6-foot hedge. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's screened by existing trees and shrubs, and we will be planting a whole another row of evergreen screening.
So if not for the potential viewer, I mean, who is it screened from whose perspective?
Well, yeah, I view the screening is just as much from the people who are inside the secure school area as it is from the people on the outside. It is the aesthetics of an 8-foot fence that would be broken by a 6-foot bottom in vegetation. That's a very different perspective, primarily from the inside.
Well, I think the legislative, again, the standard is 6 foot, over 6 feet, you need to have screening that is to provide a 6-foot high screen. So you have a higher fence than you do a screen, okay? Yes, a higher fence than you do the screen. So the person who's inside the fence, is going to see the fence. So I think staff would, I think the legislative history would support the interpretation that screening is from the outside of the property line viewer. Again, the whole purpose of the land use standards is not to tell a property owner how to internally manage their property for their own purposes. It's to deal with the offsite impacts. So I think with that context as well, we agree that it's a screening question from the property owners offsite, okay? You, drivers, property owners, et cetera. It's from the offsite visual. The question, though, as staff has applied this, is trying to look for a clear and objective interpretation of what screening means. The further away you get, the more factually ambiguous you get as to whether somebody can see around the corner, down a view angle or something like that. So the closer it is in, and I think you indicated, Evan, 5 to 10 feet is 5. What's the history?
I'd say close proximity to the fence.
Close proximity, so
Depends
I
on
would think
the-
5 feet, but myself.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
from
would
the type
agree
of the
with
hedge you choose.
So that's the way it's been applied in order to avoid having a factual determination as to screening, because it's.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there other questions?
Yes, I know when Evan was speaking about the request for a major variance, the burden is on the applicant to show, I know you went through the undue hardship, but there was a second code that you went through that had 3 criteria, if I recall, and you said, or it may have been the same one, and you said, acknowledge that one of them was met. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was the second criterion.
Well, I mean, oh,
Let me find it here. Go to my staff report.
Excuse me.
Yeah, so it's criterion 2, which
And
is,
this is of the undue, is it possible to put this on the screen?
Christina, can you put Evan's presentation back up? Thank you.
while we're waiting for that, let me just make the point. The first criterion is unnecessary hardship. And then there are 4 considerations that are given to that criterion of undue hardship.
Okay.
Then there's a second criterion, and that has to do with, I think, offsite impacts.
Will not be injurious.
Well, not be injurious.
The
And the
neighborhood.
third one is minimum necessary. So there's 3 criterion, but number 1 has 4 considerations. You don't have to meet all 4 considerations, and I think we've said as far as impacts, even that's, let me,
so there's the first criterion with the 4 considerations, and then there's second and third.
Okay, yeah, could we, because I think there's a lot going on here. Could we go to the slide right before it, please? Okay, so you may approve a variance. So this one, it doesn't say whether it's or and, so is the second slide an option?
well, no, the second slide is the continuation.
Of number 4?
There's I, double I, and triple I, and you'll see in, well, you may approve a variance if it's established that, and
So
you
it's-
have to have all 3 to approve it.
Okay, so
You can't just get a variance because it's the minimum variance necessary to make a reasonable use of property, okay? You have to go
Right, but
through
I'm
the
just-
analysis.
right, I understand, but if this is this verbatim the language of the code?
Yes.
Yes.
It doesn't,
Yeah, what's not verbatim, if you will, that the heading, the paragraph at the top starts LOC, it starts with double I there.
yeah,
See that?
I just need a moment to look at it then.
Okay. That's just been repeated from the first one. So both of them lead into that.
So commissioners, just to clarify, there are 3 criteria for the major variance. All 3 criteria have to be met. And then there's some guidance underneath it, kind of sub-criteria, if you will, or considerations. And so this is the first criterion on this slide. The second 2 criterion are on the next slide.
Apologize for the delay, I just kind of like to look at it all in one piece, if I may.
Could you move ahead to the next slide, please? If Commissioner
I can look
Lyons-
at it here on the
Are you
city's
able to find it?
website. I'll look at the code, yeah, thank you. So then just based on a quick read, it seems like the applicant would need to show there's an unnecessary hardship.
That's the usual
Right,
stumbling
and
block.
it's based on the use here.
That's that's what staff has heard, is it's a use-driven desire for the 8-foot fence.
I mean, I very much see the benefit and value of not having this hedge here, and I've interpreted your application, what you've said with that in mind, and I don't see anything here that would allow us to not require the hedge, as staff has said.
We'll get to that in deliberations. Are there other questions or comments of staff on the application, of the applicant or staff? I wanted to ask about the pathway that requires the elimination of 4 trees, creating a gap in the skyline. Could you describe that in a little more detail?
Go back to your presentation.
Yeah. You could see the red pathway that comes up from Country Club Road. Part of that pathway, we would be required to remove some of the trees. So the utilities that are going in, the driveway itself, we've tried to maintain as much as we could as with the existing, but to get the accessible pathway, and we have to make some changes, and that kind of required trees.
So this is a pathway that leads to Country Club Road and circumvents, goes around the perimeter of the property for the public to walk around the school without going into the school grounds.
Right,
Where
so
does the pathway lead? I'm probably challenged
yeah,
understanding this
The
schematic.
accessible pathway leads directly to the front door. So that entry plaza. You can see how it kind of
Oh, okay, that
switchbacks.
Mm-hmm.
That comes back up. It's a fully accessible pathway all the way up. Something that the site has never had before.
So that's a pathway for students who are walking up from Country Club Road
Yep.
to get to the central entry point.
Or rolling in a wheelchair potentially.
Is there one primary student entry point to the entire building?
There's 2, but they both funnel in. So we have a visitor entry and a student entry. In the mornings, students will enter at what is shown here in red as the student entry, goes generally towards the commons area. As staff prepares to open, teachers are prepping in their classrooms, corridors will open and kids will be allowed to come in. At that point, the student entry locks down. Visitor entry in our secure vestibule, the outside door will remain open. The interior door will go into lockdown mode. Visitors will have to check in at that point.
I see. What is your current schedule for commencing construction and completing construction, putting the proposed building to use?
We are going to be bidding this project in the fall. We will be starting construction in June of '24.
And completing?
2 years later.
You had proposed 2 alternative designs. What are the factors that will lead to the final decision on that?
Money. We've found, and we've already accepted most of the changes for the alternate plan. They look generally the same. The finishes changes are really kind of what it comes down to. Based on our estimates, we're required to make some changes here.
I noticed that for evaluating the parking adequacy, the entire site was taken into account, including the Uplands Elementary building. How is, if at all, do you envision that building being used, the Uplands Elementary building, if at all, with this new middle school? Or what use is being put to the Uplands Elementary School, if you know?
The Uplands facility has been used as a swing school. As we're building new schools, those schools will go into it. Right now, we have River Grove Elementary School housed at Uplands. Upcoming, as you guys had heard already, the Uplands campus will be used during the replacement of the middle school. After that, the use of the modulars will not be used for classrooms in the future. We will likely remove some of the modulars after the replacement projects are done. The middle school will be the only time that that school is full up for the duration of the rebuild. In the future, right now, we have a long-range facility plan that is talking about replacing another elementary school, Forest Hills. That one may be coming after, and then after that, it's a question mark and really up to the community and district staff to make a recommendation to our school board in future use.
I see, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant at this point?
I have a question about the traffic flow. With this image that you have up, it doesn't look like it, but would the traffic flow, again, you know, having the experience as a parent at Lake Ridge and dealing with some of the issues there, I'm curious if the traffic flow extends down to where you have what appear to be school buses in the image, or if, you know, the traffic analysis looked at it at its peak, and just if you have any comments about that.
Yeah, so the planned south lot is for staff parking only, as well as bus drop-off. So buses will come in. At the same time, we'll be having parents come in. They will take a turn into the parking lot with the parent drop-off loop, where they will be able to stack and drop off their students around that entire parking lot. Separating the buses and parent drop-off has been critical and can be achieved with a single point of entrance to a site. We do well at Lake Ridge, although some of our parents still not so well. We're trying to continue to educate, not saying that all of our parents, especially ones here, are doing that, but we continue to try to correct some behavior.
Thank you. No other questions.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I do apologize, but I do have one more
Certainly, we've kind of interrupted your presentation with
consideration.
questions, so please finish.
With regards to condition B10.A regarding plant sizes, the condition reads, illustrate plant species, size, and spacing on the final plan. It suggests that shrubs should be in 3-gallon, 24 to 36 inches high. Caliber of trees, we understand that and are okay with that, but we are recommending that we modify the language slightly. Staff has suggested that they may support the reduction to a minimum of 2-gallon size. The way that the condition reads, it appeared to be more guidance than strict you shall. However, my understanding is that this is pretty typical language that staff does use in their staff reports. However, with the plans that we're proposing, and we do want to avoid some recent projects, Lake Ridge Middle School being one of them, where we have a significant amount of plants that has become a challenge to maintain. We've taken a very much different approach here with the type of plants we're using. Our landscape architect is here tonight, and in front of this, we've talked about what we would like to have considered. 1 gallon for the shrubs. We've found that native plants, which we're planting, many of them here on site, do much better in smaller gallons sizes. The 2-gallon size for those type of plants are next to impossible to find. We're requesting that the condition be changed to suggest that.
And could you just clarify which condition this is?
So this is 10A,
Okay,
B10.
B10.
It's on page 4 of the staff report.
yeah. Thank you. Any other remarks from the applicant at this point?
If we're forced to do screening, we'll do screening. I knew it was going to be a challenge, and I understand the significance in making an exception. I do believe that there is probably future consideration based on the use. I think it's incredibly important with what we have happening in that courtyard, how important that courtyard is for us. Everyday function, places to congregate, a lot of students in an area, minimal supervision. Thank you so much for reviewing for tonight.
Well, thank you very much for being here, and we appreciate your team being here as well. I want to ask if there are any members of the public who wish to testify. We had Miss Nancy Osborne was mentioned earlier. I don't know if she's here. So we will, City Attorney, did you want to make a comment?
Well, yes, come forward, but since you weren't here when we did the process, I just want to remind you that individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. I don't think there's any other person to cede time to you. Do you recognize a neighborhood association?
No, just myself.
Just yourself? All right, 5 minutes. That does not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. And I think that's
Okay,
probably
thank
it.
you. I won't take very much of the time.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Yes, thank you. It's very interesting. So I walk my dog a lot at the junior high school, and I go down to Springbrook Park, and it's a beautiful area. I think the design of the new school is fabulous. I love it that it's 2 stories, more classrooms. And I love it, the athletic lights are going to be LED directed downward, so it won't produce sky glow that affects our migrating birds. So way to go on that. But I was most dismayed to see, when I got out of my car on Saturday, a big yellow ribbon around this beautiful beech tree. It's a copper beech tree. It sits on a knoll right near the campus accessibility pathway. It's all by itself pretty much, except there's a fir tree right behind it. And I've admired this tree for a long time. It's got a beautiful trunk, big extending branches, beautiful burgundy leaves, and it has a huge shaded area around it. So in reading, I'm going to make this really short, but in reading the staff analysis, they indicated that they're going to redo the pathway that exists currently from Country Club to the school, because it's pretty steep and it goes right straight up to the school. So in reading, it said that they were going to make it a meandering pathway with stone benches, but they're going to cut down the tree with all the shade. So I'm thinking, okay, the kids are going to be walking to school and walking home in the hot sun, and we know it's getting hotter and drier, and they're going to be sitting on stone benches in the sun with no shade. Now, I do see that there are some trees proposed to be planted along the campus accessibility pathway, but if we could just redesign that pathway to be a little bit more meandering, and if it could meander near the beech tree, under the beech tree, have the stone structures where they can sit and relax in the shade, that would be tremendous. So I had some other things to say about the trees, and there are only 15 trees that are over 15 inches that are considered significant. And in the arborist report, it said that there are other trees of the same species of equal or larger size than the 15 significant trees. And the beech tree is one of these significant trees. Well, this isn't true. There is only one beech tree in this whole setting. There are lots of sweet gums and oaks and cedar and fir and maples, but there's only this one beautiful beech tree. Have you all ever seen a beech tree? It's beautiful.
I can't recall.
So there's only one of these beech trees, and it's sitting right on this little knoll. And I know they have to do some excavation to get that pathway a little bit more level, but if there's any way that you could change that, that would be terrific. So the number of the tree is 6566. Repeat after me. 6566. And that's the tree I'd like you to try to preserve for the students so they can be shaded during our hot summer days. Thank you very much.
Any questions of Ms. Osborne? Thank you for being here and staying to provide your comments. Is there anyone else either for or against the application or neutral that wishes to speak?
For the record, we'll put her in the opposition category.
Very good. Shall we invite the applicant up to provide rebuttal? Perhaps you could point out where tree 6566 is and discuss whether there are any reasonable alternative means permitted within the zone for preserving the tree. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Cami Culbertson, a principal at Range Studio LLC and the landscape architect on the project. And thank you, Nancy, for your comments. I too really wanted to keep that beech tree because it's beautiful. Unfortunately, due to our gradients, to get an ADA accessible path to our entrance, that was the fewest amount of trees that we could remove. If we were to grade it other ways, we would remove even more trees along the street frontage and have a less direct path for students that we know at this age in particular, we want to get the most direct path, or otherwise they will create it. So finding that balance in terms of accessibility, inclusivity, and keeping as many trees as we could on site.
Can you point out where on this illustration tree 6566 is?
It's approximately at the end of the second switchback as it enters onto our
You can use
site.
the pointer.
Right here.
I see,
And there's 27 feet of grade change between Country Club Road and our visitor parking lot that we are meeting. So it's a lot of grade change, and unfortunately, not a successful environment for the trees to stay in.
Are there other comments you'd like to provide in the nature of rebuttal?
Not so much, other than we did spend a lot of time. At one point, I think that my team said, this is not possible. They were able to make it possible, and through many iterations, we came up with what we believe is the best path, so to speak, with the least amount of destruction.
And this is bearing in mind ADA compliance issues?
Absolutely. It was one of my primary requirements for the site.
Thank you. Any other questions by commissioners of the applicant on rebuttal? Do you have any other concluding comments? If not, we appreciate you being here and answering our questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're now at the part of, prior to closing the public hearing, a person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence. If a request is made, the public hearing would be either continued to date certain, not less than 7 days later, or the record will remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing to enable additional written evidence or testimony to be submitted, and the commission would establish the period for any rebuttal written evidence to be submitted. Is there any such request to present additional evidence? Hearing none, then to the applicant, unless waived by the applicant, the commission would allow the applicant at least 7 days after the hearing is closed to all other parties to submit final written argument in support of the application. That would not be considered, that would be considered part of the record, but not include any new evidence. Do you wish to submit final written argument? I think I saw a head shake, no? No. Nope. All right, you may proceed to deliberation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any comments on the application?
I have one. Evan, you heard the request to modify the wording under, on page 4, under section 10A, to specifically describe a 1-gallon pot for certain plants. Would that be acceptable, and can we assume that you would be comfortable to make that modification in the criteria?
Yeah, so what he talked about, that this is a standard condition that we put in all the DR applications. So it's not directly tied to any standard that says it has to be 3 gallons. So there is some leeway there to reduce the size. The problem with the landscaping plan that we have now, it just shows these hatched areas where the shrubs will be located. It doesn't show the density or the spacing of the shrubs. And that's fine for this stage. It is. We require the final landscaping plan. We can make sure the density is there. We just want to make sure that they're not sparse, that they're not, a bunch of bark chips is everywhere, and that it's a good landscaping plan. If they can do that with 1 gallon, then great.
I just don't want to get into wordsmithing tonight. If you're comfortable that we can move that way, great, thanks.
Yeah, with final approval from planning staff, then yes.
Any other comments by commissioners?
I would just say that I find the hedge bothersome, but I don't think the applicant met its burden to show that staff should grant a major variance. I think that the hardship absolutely exists, but it's created by the use and consistent with precedent as this has been applied. I don't think I could vote in favor of granting a major variance based on the requirements.
Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Shearer?
I would move that we accept the LU, I don't have the LU in front of me. Thank you. As Evan noted, as conditions with the exception of B10A going to a 1-gallon plant size. And on the sidebar, I would say the school district and the city, which I read in the paper, is going to be working much closer together, figure out a way to take care of the screening thing in the next 2 years.
Does your motion include then rejecting the applicant's request for a major variance on the evergreen hedge?
I agree. I'm just saying we accept staff's recommendations.
And your modification to the staff report recommendations on B10A is conditioned to go to the 1-gallon size, is conditioned on final review and approval by planning staff of the final landscaping that's going in?
Yeah, and just having the landscape something, I know how hard it is to get 2 gallons, that you can't.
And then just to clarify, both major variance requests are denied. It's part of your motion.
Right.
But they've said they can deal with the bicycle.
Right.
They'd have to put in the hedge, unless they
Right.
code it, unless they get a mod.
Right.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I am certainly in favor. I just wanted to comment. I'm certainly in favor of the application. I agree. I don't believe the DRC has I don't believe the requirements for the major variance on the hedge have been met. And I don't believe the DRC on its own initiative can waive the standards and requirements. That would require perhaps the City Council and Planning Commission on a more of a long-term analysis. But I do support the application. I think the use-specific standards have been met, the parking standards and access standards. I think it's reasonably compatible with uses in the vicinity. So I'll be voting in favor of the motion to approve as submitted by Commissioner Shearer and seconded by Commissioner Sangri. So Christina, would you call the roll of commissioners on the pending motion?
Arthur?
Yes.
Shearer?
Yes.
Poinsett?
Yes.
Sangri?
Yes.
Lyons?
Yes.
Very good. The motion is approved.
This is a tentative decision with written findings brought back on June 21st. Thank you. Oh, yeah, because the 19th is a holiday. 19th is a holiday.
Very good. Thank you very much to all who participated in the public hearing. Now, Planner Hasty, do we have anything on schedule review and management update?
Just some brief updates, yes. So to confirm, both Commissioner Scheer and Commissioner Smith are leaving at the end of their terms, which end on the last hearing will be the 21st. As I said at the last hearing, we are going to have a celebration of service. Our admin staff, Christina Sequina, is dealing with some family issues, so we're not sure if she'll be in attendance, but I know she'd like to pass on her gratitude as well. But we'll work on getting that to be something worthwhile of attending. From there, the council is working on getting 2 new commissioners in place. I believe interviews are happening this week.
Yes.
So you're
June 8th,
participating,
I
correct?
believe. Yes.
All right. So we'll hopefully know by the end of the month who our commissioners are. And then from there, we'll have to work on doing elections for the chair and vice chair positions because of those, both of those terms are up. So whether or not the 2 new commissioners will be active and present on the first hearing, which will be July 3rd, or if they'll be more active and present on the second hearing, which would be July 21st. We'll just sort of see how that plays out. We want to do onboarding and trainings before they're asked to participate in a hearing. We do also, I did want to check, simply because there is kind of this wonky date of a long weekend and a holiday and then a DRC hearing shoved in the middle of that. I wanted to check and make sure that we do have a quorum for July 3rd. So I just wanted to reach out right now and know if you could get back to me as soon as possible and let me know if you're going to be in attendance. That would be great. It might, sorry. Go ahead.
You could attend by phone if necessary.
Yeah, so depending on, I don't think at this point there are any public hearings scheduled. Of course, the next public hearing could be continued to that date, so I can't guarantee it right now. But if it is just adoption of findings and minutes, then possibly we could meet remotely or you could participate by phone. So we'll just sort of see what plays out on the 21st, looking at that first meeting in July, again, July 3rd. So a lot of hearing dates coming up. I just want to make sure that we have active and trained commissioners in place and we have a quorum. So again, just kind of a plug for reaching out to me and to avoid the unnecessary email chains back and forth where I'm saying, he's the chair. No, he's the chair. Nobody's the chair. So let's not do that again. And I will promise not to do that again. So those are the 2 updates I have, except to talk about the June 21st schedule. We do have the findings for tonight. And then we also have the Habitat for Humanity project coming on the 21st. And that is, they got the approval for the 23 lot subdivision in, I believe, 2018. So they're coming back with the townhomes, the actual DR permit for the townhomes now. And that will be Ellen Davis, Associate Planner Ellen Davis. So that is what we'll be doing for the hearings. And then we also, if you remember, have Jessica Nimonalou and possibly City Engineer Erica Rooney attending for work sessions to talk about DRC actions and memos from there. We would need to probably maybe select a presiding officer for the July 3rd hearing, depending on who is in attendance and who is not. We would also consider whether or not we would be meeting remotely on that July 3rd. And then, like I said, we would have a celebration afterwards for Scheer and Smith. So that's my update.
Clarification. You said the Habitat for Humanity would be the 21st. Which one?
Oh,
June or
I'm so
July?
sorry, June 21st, yes. So the next hearing
The
this
next
month,
hearing.
on
So
June
that will not be telephonic because there will be a hearing as well as a,
Correct, that would be an in-person hearing.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
The remote would be possibly for July 3rd, and then again, possibly for August 7th, but we'll deal with that, the meetings before, once we have a better idea of the schedule.
Anything else on schedule review or management?
That's it. Unless there's any questions for me.
Any questions? Well, I just want to express how much I've enjoyed and appreciated working with Vice Chair Smith and immediate past Chair Scherer, and I'll save my more detailed comments for the celebration of service. Any other business tonight? If not, we'll adjourn. Thank you very much.